Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with part 4 of our OBR Battletome coverage, where I'll be breaking things down for the Subfactions this time, and we'll be trying to see how someone who hasn't really looked at the Battletome yet but has a lot of experience breaking down Battletomes would approach it. But before we move on to covering the contents here, let me just remind you that, of course, we'd love to see you in the Discord, in the comment section below, liking, subscribing to the video and the channel, respectively. Whatever makes the most sense for you. It has a big impact on our kind of the algorithm for getting the signal out there for our channel, and of course it creates a nice kind of interactive community for us to know what's working for you guys, what isn't working, and maybe what ideas you'd like to see in the near future. But moving on to kind of our overview of what the series is looking like here, we've already covered the battle traits for the army in general. And then we covered the pitch battle profiles, and then 2 videos worth of battle line unit coverage, both the unconditional battle line and then the conditional battle line that gets turned on by having specific requirements met in your list building. But now that we've kind of seen what the kind of bare bones, pun intended here for OBR, of the army looks like, let's move on to what you might see as battle traits light in the form of subfactions. OBR has 6 subfactions, as we'll see when I do the coverage here, and those each have a type of application to how the army likes to play. It kind of steers the army yet further in a specific direction, not just in the generic way that battle traits do. Thereafter, we'll be covering the spell lore, including endless spells, the enhanceable heroes, as in those that could take command traits or artifacts, and in this current season, which might be over soon with the GHB, the aspects of the champion, of course. And then we have the enhancements themselves, such as command traits, artifacts, and the rest of the army, which might be split over a couple different videos. In general, what we're trying to do in this series is not necessarily cover the OBR book, though of course that's what's going to be happening anyway, but really just kind of giving people a different way of looking at a book and what it means to look at a book, to analyze it. As Jonas has pointed out elsewhere, a lot of people don't like to write in their Battletomes, but I find it very helpful for analyzing and breaking down a book. So you're going to see at least how someone like me, who owns all the 3rd edition books and many of the 2nd edition books, how I like to break things down and things that catch my eye right off the bat. Of course, this means I'm going to miss some things, so go easy on me in the comments if you see something that I missed that's obvious. And some of this is definitely going to be pre-post future FAQs, of course, depending on where the recording was made relative to where the video comes out and all that. So as you can see with all the other comments we have that we've been covering as intro to every one of these videos, it's really not just about OBR, it's really about the big picture kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's get into the content.
All right, so now that I've covered the generic battle traits, I've looked at the pitch battle profiles for just point values in general, kind of loosely, and mainly to see what the battle line options are, conditional and not. And then I looked at all 6 of the potential battle line options to get a sense for what the kind of meat and potatoes is of this army. I'm now ready to go look at the subfactions to see what kind of buffs they're giving. And I have a feeling this is going to have at least some impact on those 6 units, at least in some places. It could be more generic, but we'll see. Obviously, coming off a 2nd edition book, they used to have locked subfaction artifacts and command traits. And so it's like most 3rd edition books, I'm expecting them to just have one main rule that applies to each of these subfactions. Also worth pointing out is that none of the 4 conditional battle line options that get unlocked become unlocked through a subfaction choice. For a lot of books, that's pretty common, where you pick a subfaction and it gives you extra battle line options. But with OBR, it's only about who your general is, if it's a Mortisan, and if you have Nagash or Archon in your list at all. So These I would normally write along with these guys. Say if Mortis Praetorians unlock something, I would write unlocks blank 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 as a battle line, but that's not the case here. Okay, so Mortis Praetorians, the Dread Legion ability. Once per turn, during the enemy charge phase, after an enemy unit finishes a charge move, you can pick one friendly Mortis Praetorians unit within 12 inches of that enemy unit and more than 3 inches from all enemy units. That unit can attempt a charge. We saw something like this in Soulblight. I forget which subfaction had this, which dynasty or legion had it. But I think this is more or less exactly the same. It might have been Legion of Blood, and Legion of Night, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But yeah, it's a good ability. So it's a once per turn, and it's in the enemy charge phase. They have to make a charge, and you pick one unit that's just regular within, not holy. So sometimes that's important. A lot of times when it benefits your own units, it has to be holy, and when it has something to do with enemy units, it's just within, because it would be too easy for them to kind of lock you out of that ability by like having one base a little bit out after a redeploy or something. But these units the unit that's going to get to do this has to be outside of combat, and they can attempt to charge. And it makes sense that it's within 12, because almost everyone's charge range is 12 inches unless you get that 18-inch 3d6 charge viable window to use. This is kind of like a combat army chargey version of Unleash Hell. It's not a command ability, it's just an ability. And it's keyworded to Mortis Praetorians. Now, I don't know, of the unique heroes that OBR has, I don't know who's locked to what subfactions. I haven't looked at that yet. So this clearly doesn't apply to anyone that's not in this one. This might be the main subfaction. Usually the unique characters are locked to the like main city. So in like KO, that's Barak Nar, although technically we have a Barak Mornar guy too. Or in Ideneth, that would be Iron Rock, or name a thing, and a lot of them have it, like Emetrica or whatever for Lumineth. So I don't know if this would benefit those heroes, but that's usually kind of a niche side issue anyway. So this is applying to literally all of your units, except for those. So that's pretty cool. And you can't take allies, so don't worry about that. Okay, so that's Mortis Praetorians. As subfactions go, mobility's nice. Being able to guarantee, especially for a slow army, that you get a charge off is pretty cool. They could try to play around it pretty easily. I think we talked about this in the Soulblight review, that this could end up just being a way of, if they want to turn it off and be aware of how to turn it off, they just have to be clever about where they charge, or maybe not charge something if they don't want a counter charge to happen. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Okay. So Petrifx Elite. I know that Petrifx used to be like the big deal because it was really good at save stacking. Let's see what happens. Or maybe it wasn't save stacking. It was something having to do with save, now that I look at this. So Petrifx Elite. Subtract 1 from the damage inflicted to a minimum of 1 by each successful attack that targets a friendly Petrifx Elite Hekatos or Gothazar Harvester unit. Okay, so a couple things to break down. First, subtracting 1 from the damage inflicted. If you're not aware, this usually means damage profile. So like the damage characteristic of a profile. So like if you have like 3 attacks, 2s, -1, 2, this would move it down to 1. Now, there might be an argument, I'd have to look at the exact wording, but if an attack made mortal wounds, and it did say 2 mortal wounds, does it reduce it to 1? And this comes down to kind of a niche rules argument of whether damage is universally referred to as just any kind of incoming pain, if that's what that refers to, or if it's literally the damage characteristic. So I'd have to take a look at the rules for that. But in the meantime, we know that it can't go any lower than 1, and this kind of helps to mitigate some of that question. Is it says successful attack. Now, again, for those that don't know, attack might seem like a generic word in Warhammer, but attack doesn't just mean like anything that's aggressive against you. It means specifically something triggered by the use of a shooting profile, so a missile profile or a melee profile, which means this would include shooting attacks in Unleash Hell, any hero phase fighting with your melee attacks or shooting attacks if you can do that. But it's not doing it off of like magic or an ability that happens in the shooting phase but isn't officially a shooting attack, that kind of thing, or impact hits. None of that counts for this. It's because this is just an attack. Now, this is only for Hekatos units and Gothazar Harvesters. So this is a benefit to, and I was asking about this earlier, what a Hekatos unit is. If you might remember, the 4 conditional battle line units, so that would be Immortus Guard, Necropolis Stalkers, and the 2 Archai units, or whatever they're called. Let's see, I'm just going to double check that this. Hekatos. I don't know if this is on screen. Yeah, we're good. And then we got Hekatos here. So those 2 dudes have this keyword. I'm going to flip. Yeah, the Morcast units are also Hekatos. Sorry, it's not on the screen. Hekatos and Hekatos down there. So those 4 units are definitely getting it. Now, I would also go through the book and quickly scan everything. I'm not going to do it on camera. I'll let you know if I find this out later. But I would go through and scan to see if any heroes qualify as Hekatos. They might very well. And if they do, then this applies to them too, which is good. So it's in we call this linear rules writing, where it's kind of telling you who you should take in the army. If you want to make the most of this subfaction, then you want to bring Hekatos units and Gothazar Harvesters. Now, I don't really have to look this up because there's only one unit that probably has this keyword. Now, if it wasn't in bold, it would be just for that unit. Now, they're trying to get away from this in 3rd edition books to be extra clear about keyworded stuff, because this, most likely it has this keyword, in addition to being the name, that is the name of the unit. This is the unit that walks around collecting bones and stuff. That's single, but not a monster. Or at least, it might be a monster, but it's not, I don't know, but it's not a behemoth. And it can't be battle line. So it's basically kind of like your bigger dudes. I'd be curious to see if it's any of your heroes. In fact, maybe I'll go look at that right before I pick up with the next subfaction. But if you were to take an army that only had like one of these units, you're not benefiting much from it. It's not unlocking battle line, and you have 5 other subfactions to be choosing from. I have to imagine something would be better or more logical for you to take than just this. Unless, I don't know, you're one of those people that paints things based off of some color scheme or lore. But in that case, I would just say that they're petrifx elite that just moved to Mortis Praetorian's land. I don't know. Don't be weird about it. Like, be smart and do the paint scheme you want, I guess. No one cares, right? But anyway, you do you. All right, I'm going to look at that rule. And I'm back. Okay, so in a quick scan of everything, I didn't find anything else that had the Hekatos keyword, so I think it's just for these 5 units, the 4 Hekatos units plus Gothazar Harvester. Also, I did confirm that the Gothazar Harvester is a monster, even though he's not a behemoth, so that's cool. Gets to do monstrous rampages. We'll analyze his war scroll at some other point. And then I also saw that in looking at keywords that Mortis Praetorians is the main subfaction. Again, I'm ignorant of these things, and so anyone that's got subfaction locked seems to be in Mortis Praetorians. Excuse me, I might have missed someone in there, but in general, that was the case. So moving on, let's look at, I'm not going to do that one. Let's come over here. Staliac Lords. As far as I'm aware, this has to do with the mounted army, and then I'm quickly looking at this. You can re-roll charges for friendly Staliac Lords units that have a mount. So that kind of answers that question. Okay, so that would be your cavalry unit that we said, that we covered. What was their name? The Cavallos Riders, Death Riders, something like that. And if I'm not mistaken, they had a mortal wound charge based off of your unmodified charge roll, which means that re-rolling the charges, let's say you're 3 inches out, and you feel pretty certain that you're not going to fail that charge a second time and roll double one, snake eyes. So you just want to get more mortal wounds, then there you go. This reroll could be nice. It's also, of course, guaranteeing a little bit more that all of your stuff gets in. Now, the question is, how many units in this army have mounts? And remember, technically a mount is also a companion, anything with a companion. So that would be the thing you'd want to go check. Obviously, that's those guys plus the hero version of them. I think there might be one or two heroes that are mounted on like a similar kind of like regular steed. Archon, I don't think is locked to a subfaction, so he would be able to use this if as long as he's not locked to a subfaction. So that he is definitely on a mount. Nagash can't get your subfaction keyword, so even though he's got companions and would technically count, he wouldn't get to use it. Off the top of my head, there's no one. Well, actually, Catacros, it depends on whether he's locked or not to Mortis Praetorians. If he is locked, then no. But he definitely has companions, and companions count as mounts, so unless they would FAQ that, he would get to use this too. I'll go check that real quick just to have a quick answer for that one. So Archon is not locked, and one of the guys that has a mount that would be Archcavallo Santos. And then we've got, I need to look at, what's his name? Catacros. He's in Mortis Praetorian, so never mind, he can't use it. So, I mean, I think we're mainly talking about, Mortis Soul Mason has a mount, so he could do it. I might have missed one or two things in there, but that's the basic gist, is that you're building a cavalry army, and unfortunately this army is just not, they don't have a ton of cavalry options. If you really like Archon, the generic guy that's on a mount, and then the Cavallos guys, sure. I'm currently thinking this isn't as good as it seems. If it unlocked some kind of battle line that we didn't already have, then okay, or I don't know. I feel like it needs a little more juice, but that's just my first impression. All right, Ivory Host. I don't think I've ever heard of this one. I love that it rhymes with Ivory Coast, so I guess that's clever. And it kind of makes sense, right? In a certain sense, Ivory Coast, if I'm not mistaken, is on the west coast of Africa, which is not, I could be totally wrong about that, but it's definitely not, and I know its normal name is in French, Côte d'Ivoire, so it probably is on the western side. And then, of course, original, what was it called? I'm totally blanking. The inspiration for OBR in fantasy was the Tomb Kings. And they were, as a lot of things in fantasy battles were, inspired by real world places, so Egypt. So at least it's keeping it on the African continent. So anyway. All right, let's see. We got a designer's note, so this might be an interesting rule. Add 1 to the number of hits scored by the Naderite weapon's battle trait by friendly Ivory Host units if the unmodified hit was a 6 and any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated to that unit earlier in the turn. Okay, designer's note. If a unit is affected by this ability and the empowered Naderite weapon spell, and I haven't read any of the spells, the effect of this ability is only applied on an unmodified hit roll of 6. Okay, I need to reread this one. Not about the designer's note. Let's see. Add 1 to the number of hits scored by the Naderite weapon's battle trait by friendly Ivory Host units if the unmodified hit roll was 6 and any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated to that unit. Okay, this is what threw me off. I was like, sometimes with this and that in Warhammer, you have to also kind of speak legalese here. This usually applies to your own unit, and that usually applies to your enemy unit, which is why this threw me off. So I'm imagining them attacking, and that would usually be their target unit. And then earlier this turn, I'm like, but isn't it too late? They don't get to fight twice in the same turn. So I was thinking it was saying only if they fight for the second time do they get to make the use of this, which would be like, what's the one unit, Immortus Guard, that gets to fight twice or whatever, once per game. So, but what this actually means is the target unit, let's see, no, your unit, sorry, not the target unit, had wounds allocated. So basically, this is making you have triple exploding hits instead of double exploding hits, but only if your unit took some wounds earlier in the turn. This is worth pointing out. It's not phase, so you could have suffered it in the enemy magic phase or hero phase if someone fought then, or if there was an unleash hell while you charged in. There's a whole bunch of ways this could be triggered. So it doesn't have to mean that you fight second in the combat phase, or, you know. But it's not for just one unit, it's for all the units that this is true of. So you're a relatively tanky army, so you're benefiting largely from that fact that you can kind of endure this, and then you're having triple output. Which I haven't done the math on, but obviously is going to be stronger than just +1 to hit. I wonder if it's the exact impact is. But it's clearly good, triple exploding hits. And then, like, as per the designer's note, it doesn't stack. So currently, in looking at the 4 subfactions out of 6 that I've looked at, I feel like Staliac Lords is my least favorite. And it's in the sense that it's clearly sending you down a build and then is not giving you an amazing benefit for it. And similarly, with as far as sending you down a particular build, Petrifx Elite here, Petrifx Elite was sending you down a specific build, but at least it has 5 units that it applies to, and it really makes you tanky if you want to build that. I like this one, and it seems less broken than what it once was. Maybe that was not only the main ability of the subfaction, but also their required command trait and artifact and stuff, and maybe command ability. Mortis Praetorians, Mortis Praetorians, those movement shenanigans are good. I don't know if it's going to be game-changing, but the fact that so many of your guys are locked to the subfaction, like Catacross, makes it a little bit more worth it. It's kind of, maybe it's chasing good money after bad just to let your unique heroes that are bound to this subfaction be able to use this ability, but it's not bad. It's a good ability. So currently, I would definitely say Staliac Lords is the weakest. All right, let's look at the last 2. So we got Null Myriad here. Okay. All right. Again, I don't know much about this, but I have heard of this one. You can roll a dice each time a friendly Null Myriad unit wholly within 9 inches of any friendly Null Myriad Mortisans or a friendly Archon. I love a friendly Archon. It reminds me of the Pokemon language of a friendly Archon appears or whatever. I never actually played Pokemon, but I've heard it enough. It's technically legalese. Okay, rewind. You can roll a dice each time a friendly Null Myriad unit wholly within 9 inches of any friendly Null Myriad Mortisan, so your main heroes. And of course, they unlock the 2 mid-grade guys, the Necropolis Stalkers and Mortis Guard. Or a friendly Archon is affected by a spell cast by an enemy unit or the abilities of an endless spell summoned by an enemy unit. On a 2+, ignore the effect of that spell or the effects of that endless spell. Okay, so it just makes you like have a spell ignore, a 2+ spell ignore, if you stick kind of bunched around stuff. This is obviously dependent on your meta. If you're not going up against a whole lot of magic or you're going up against Khorne and Fire Slayers, then this is basically wasted. Of course, that frees you up to stay away from Archon or your Mortisans. In the current GC season, your Mortisans are often GCs, from what I know, which means that you're going to want to take a couple anyway. Holier than 9 is not the worst bubble. Could be worse. And 2+ spell ignore. I mean, I don't hate it. I don't know how sensitive to magic you are, but this clearly like negates a lot of that. So, okay. I'd put this somewhere. This is a more niche-y one. And of course, it really wants you to use at least Archon, but probably also 1 or 2 Mortisans. But your whole army gets to benefit from it, so it's something. Okay, and then lastly, Crematorians. Each time a friendly Crematorians model is slain, before removing that model from play, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 3 inches of it and roll a number of dice equal to the wounds characteristic of that model, so the one that died. For each 5+, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So per wound characteristic, you're doing a third of a wound on average, mortal wound. So for every 3 wounds your model has, you're doing 1 mortal wound when you die. Fortunately, it's an enemy unit within 3 inches, so it doesn't have to be the closest to enemy model or something like that. If you were within combat range of 2 different units, you could pick the better target if you like, even though they're further away. It's not bad. I don't know what kind of like bringing models back dynamics this army has. There was obviously a little bit of that with the Ossiarch commands. So an army that gets to do things on death and also bring stuff back, like zombies in Soulblight right now, that's not a bad combo. But I don't know how much of that we're getting in OBR, so it remains to be seen. And so this kind of points out, again, the benefits and the kind of windy road that one has in learning the rules for a book. I'm trying to do it in as logical of an order given my current knowledge of the book or of the army. But you're almost inevitably going to read something earlier than it makes total sense in the big picture. Having a good sense for how GW writes rules and interactions between units and stuff, as you can see from the way I'm thinking out loud with this stuff, does give you some amount of kind of foresight into probably what it's going to do, but it's not necessarily enough to kind of go off the whole thing. Currently, from what I know of the army, I'm most likely to go for the tanky build. So that'd be petrifx elite. That would probably be my first go to. And I also like those models that are kind of being buffed by it. I like all 5 of them, so that's cool. The movement shenanigans of Mortis, what is it? Mortis Praetorians. Yeah, that's not bad. But again, I don't know what I'm talking about yet, right? Like, I haven't read the spell lores. That'll be next. And I'll do the endless spells with them as well, because I consider them to be one and the same. You just have to pay points for the other ones. And I don't have a sense for the command traits. Oftentimes, command traits will give you bigger buffs. They're almost like mini subfaction abilities sometimes, or hero hammery things. Or the artifacts can sometimes be that. So I don't have a sense for all the big kind of like buffs that could be going around. But in looking what I've got here, I like Petrifex Elite a lot. I like Mortis Praetorians. Ivory Host could be fun. And maybe Crematorians. I don't know. All right, that's my thoughts on that.
And there we have it. I hope you guys have been enjoying the series. We're about halfway through at this point. I don't know how many videos we'll have at the very end, how many I'll split it into, but I think 8 is about right for this series. In the meantime, please do leave some comments down below. I love hearing what you thought of the video. I'll try to interact with you in a timely fashion. And like we've said before, join the Discord and keep this community growing stronger and stronger. In the meantime, I wish you all the best with your games of Warhammer and your theory crafting and army list building. And until next video, Ryan out.